So, a story of both accomplishments and disappointments for the political parties. Polls analyst Éric Grenier is back with us at the results board this evening. Éric, good to see you again after the long night that we had last night. But listen, let's begin with the predictions of a Liberal majority. That obviously did not happen. Where did the Liberals lose that majority?
Yeah, they were projected to probably win a majority government. There was still the possibility that they would fail to do that, primarily if they lost some of those close races we were expecting. And a lot of them were in the Greater Toronto area. We can take a look at what happened in the GTA in last night's election. If we look at what was the situation in 2021, the Liberals won a lot of seats throughout the GTA, swept both Brampton and Mississauga, north of Toronto as well. If we look at what the results we were expecting to see in the GTA, you can see that we were again expecting the Liberals to probably sweep Brampton, Mississauga, and there were a lot of toss-up ridings, particularly north of the city, but the results were that the Conservatives won those. They won lots of seats in the York region. They actually broke into Brampton and won a seat in Milton, and there was also some results in southwestern Ontario that were a little bit of a surprise. The fact that the Conservatives swept all of Essex, Windsor-Essex, all went blue, picked up a couple more ridings in Kitchener than perhaps expected, as well as winning in London Fanshawe. So we saw a lot of what we expected to see throughout the country, except in Ontario.
Yeah, in Ontario, as you say. Now, we did not call a Liberal minority last night, which means the Canadian press did not call it because we follow their decisions. But, you know, CBC, Radio-Canada, they also did not make the call for a minority until this afternoon. So what was happening that delayed that minority call?
There were still some votes being counted, some of those advance polls, but especially mail-in ballots, special ballots, and those were taking a bit longer to count. And in some cases, they did actually flip a riding. Terrebonne in the Montreal area went from Bloc to Liberal earlier today. But one of the reasons why the CBC and other places weren't willing to make a call was that a lot of the races were really close. You can look at some of the ridings that the Liberals just came up short. You can look at here in Nunavut where the gap was less than 100 votes, and that was a very close one that if it had swung to the Liberals would have got them to 170. If you look at Milton East, Halton Hill South, again, the gap there was very, very small, less than 100 votes. If that had flipped, that would have got them to 171. And then if you look in southwestern Ontario, Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore, again, a gap of just over 200 votes. If those three ridings had flipped today because of those special ballots, we'd be talking about the slimmest of majorities, but it would be a majority.
Okay, so as you and I speak right now, 169 Liberals at 144 for the Conservatives, 22 for the Bloc. You know, how solid are these results right now, Éric?
Well, we do seem to have pretty much everything that's left. There's still a few polls that are still being counted as we speak, but most of the ridings have been called, so we're not expecting anything else to switch. The only one that we're still keeping an eye on would be Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. There's still, I think, 7 polls left to count there, and while Mark Dalton of the Conservatives has a lead, it's not a huge lead, so we do have to wait to see what's going to happen in that riding. But aside from that, this looks like what we're going to get in the House of Commons when it returns.
Yeah, not enough to flip a minority to majority. So Liberals coming back in government, but again, a minority government. You know, but you know, I'm also wondering if you could dig a bit into the historic numbers for the Liberals and the Conservatives, because you know they also tell a story. Yes, Liberals are winning a minority government here, but historic numbers when you look at the top two.
Yeah, historic numbers for both the Liberals, the Conservatives. We could throw the NDP there, but in the bad sense, the worst ever results for the New Democrats. For the Liberals, this is the highest share of the vote they've gotten since the 1980 election, so it's been a while. Mark Carney did better than Jean Chrétien ever did, then Paul Martin, then Justin Trudeau, but still wasn't able to get a majority government. And for the Conservatives, Stephen Harper's best result was 39.6% in 2011. The Conservatives are just under 42% of the vote this time. You haven't seen this much vote for the top two parties since 1958, and you haven't seen both parties get over 40% since 1930. So it just kind of shows you how much of a polarized race this was something we haven't seen for decades. We'll see if it's going to continue going forward. We're in obviously a very unique context with what's happening south of the border, but this was a historic election for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, historic election, as you say. You know, we've got a couple of minutes left here, Éric. Before we're done, let's take a look at both Burnaby Central as well as Carleton, because as we noted, the NDP leader went down to defeat, as did the Conservative leader, and you're zooming in right now to the capital region. So let's start at Carleton, because I think that was the bigger surprise of the night.
Yeah, it certainly was. Not that Ottawa went Liberal. All of those ridings stuck with the Liberal Party. But Carleton, Bruce Franjoy was able to win, and by a pretty comfortable margin, 51% to 56% for Pierre Poilievre. There had been rumblings that it was possible, but really you had to see it to believe it, I think. And then when you go to what happened in the BC Lower Mainland with Jagmeet Singh, This was a pretty poor result for him. In third place with 18% of the vote, Wei Chang of the Liberals had 42%. So a disappointing night for both of those leaders for different reasons, but certainly we're going to have to wait and see what's going to happen with these leaderships for Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh.
Yeah, absolutely. Jagmeet Singh saying that he will step down once an interim leader has happened, but with Pierre Poilievre, as you say, we don't know what this actually means, not only losing the election, but also losing his own seat. Listen, Eric, a big night last night. Of course, we could not have done it without you. You did a wonderful job. Thank you for doing that last evening. Thank you for joining us again this evening to walk us through the final numbers.
Thanks. I get to take this home with me, right?
We'll talk. Éric Grenier, thank you.